Yeah, so welcome everyone to the Spaces session, this month's Privacy Roundtable discussion. We're a group that we discuss private cryptocurrencies and private techniques for um, for cryptocurrency in general. And I'm Yenachar. I represent the PIVX community, and Reuben is on. He represents Firo, and Dr. Cap, the other co-host, will be joining shortly. He represents Particle. Reuben, anything you'd like to add to that?
No, no. I mean, that's great. But who's representing Basic Swap Cap as well?
I believe, yes, I believe Dr. Cap as well. Yes, I see he's pinged. He's working on getting in now. So I'll go ahead and introduce our esteemed guest for this session, Luke Parker. Luke, are you on? Luke, who also go, yes, we can hear you. You also go by the handle Kayaba,
Great
right?
stop. Oh, sorry.
Oh, hi. Is that Dr. Cap?
Yeah, hey.
Hey.
Hey, sorry
Hi,
I'm a little
Dr.
bit
Cap.
late coming in, guys.
No, all good. Welcome. I was just introducing our guest, Luke. Goes also by the handle Kayaba and Kayaba Nerve. He's a prominent and celebrated developer of Monero and also more recently the Serai DEX. So, Luke, may introduce yourself a little more and please tell us what you're working on with Serai DEX and other areas.
Yeah, sure. And first of all, really congratulations to you on the pronunciation there. Most people do not pronounce it as Kayaba. Most people go, Kayaba or so on. So really, congratulations and thank you.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, so I'm the developer of Serai, a decentralized exchange. It's initially launching with support for Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Monero. And then after we launch, we're going to be looking at doing more integrations. It just has to have a clearly defined scope to start with. That's been in development a bit over 2 years now, and there's been a lot of interesting cryptography and challenges to solve with it. But now we're kind of just at the point where cleaning up the code base and finalizing everything and moving into reviews and audits. So that's great on our end. I'm also the researcher and developer for full chain membership proofs in the plus plus variant for Monero, which will finally replace its ring signatures with full set privacy methods, as you would see in Zcash or in PIVX, of course. And it will also bring forward secrecy and a lot of other great functionality and features to Monero.
Yeah, do you want to explain a bit about, at least to the audience or the people that will be listening into this later, what first of all, what full chain membership proofs are, and also, what does forward secrecy mean? Because I think these are terms that not everyone would be necessarily familiar with. Yeah.
Yeah, I would be happy to. I think obviously we have to start this 8-hour introduction into full chain membership proofs by going over the fundamental mathematics of it, but yeah.
No, not that.
That's
what it does.
It contrasts with the ring signature technique, right? That Monero
Yeah,
uses,
of course.
which has a smaller set of decoys, right? And you're going to expand it to everything, right?
Right. So when you make a ring signature on Monero today, you say, "Hi, here are 16 outputs, and I am spending one of these 16 outputs." And from a cryptographic perspective, from the actual mathematics of it, no one gets any further insight. All they see is that one of these 16 outputs is being spent. But obviously, it's not just about the on-chain mathematics about it. It's also about, well, there's just various off-chain data that can be applied to try to eliminate certain ring members. Like, oh, this output we know belongs to an exchange. And because we know it belongs to an exchange and we know the status of it, we know it wasn't spent in this transaction. So we can ignore it as a possible output that was spent. So for users, what this means is that if you had a ring of 16, it would now just be a ring of just 15. And there's also a lot of complexity to how you select ring members. You have to select 15 decoy ring members, and there's an algorithm for that. Bunch of commentary.
Over time, right? You have to pick it so it actually looks like they could be real, right? So
right, because most people
time
aren't spending
distribution.
outputs from 10 years ago. Most people are
Right.
spending outputs from like the past couple of weeks. So what full chain membership proofs does is instead of saying I'm spending one of these 16 outputs, it says I'm spending one output from anywhere on the entire Monero blockchain, or whatever blockchain it's applied to. And it doesn't only pick a subset. It says I'm spending one out of any historical output. In the case of Monero, this will be over 100 million outputs. And that means that your privacy is the privacy of all honest outputs on the blockchain. Honest here means that whoever actually owns the output didn't disclose its status to anyone and everyone, and that the output is actually private to its holder. So instead of your privacy being the privacy of the honest outputs you happen to choose, it will be the privacy of every single honest output on the entire blockchain. In full chain membership proofs itself, it's a trustless setup. We're not introducing any trusted setup. It's not using too far out there cryptography, although it is using some really cool pieces that I'm excited and happy about. It's largely built on bullet proofs, which has been around since 2017, 2016, and as cryptographic proof that's been in Monero for years and has been widely reviewed and adopted across the ecosystem, so on and so on. So it's just an upgrade that's been necessary for a long time and is something I'm really happy to be personally moving forward.
It sounds like a great change.
Thank you. Then forward secrecy means that a quantum computer, if and when one is ever built, will be unable to de-anonymize transactions. So in this case, outputs created after the full chain membership proofs plus hard fork will a quantum computer will not be able to determine when they are spent or if they are spent. But as of right now, in the current Monero protocol, a quantum computer could determine if/when an output is spent.
And that really sounds wonderful, because I think it's underappreciated, the forward risk of privacy, right? If something comes along and like becomes a challenge to, like, let's say Bitcoin, they'll change the algorithm, right? And everybody will move their coins and it's all still good. But you can't like reverse past secrecy. It's important to get that right. So just like maybe at a higher level, how are you doing that? I know, for example, with Bitcoin, there's, people like to talk like public key encryption. It's not quantum computer resistant because it uses discrete log, right? But the hashing algorithm is quantum computer resistant, SHA-256 and so forth. So how can we get our mind around what it is that you're doing? Are you avoiding discrete log? Are you introducing something that is known to be resistant to quantum computers? How are you achieving the forward privacy?
First of all, I just wanted to say I completely agree that we have to make sure that the private data we send now is private for the next 100 years.
Right.
I just completely
Absolutely
agree with that. It's why this was a very important piece of functionality to me personally.
So important.
The way we do it, we're still using elliptic curve. And elliptic curves
or discrete
are
log,
generally vulnerable to, yes, quantum computers. A quantum computer can find, quote unquote, the simple version is they can find private keys from public keys. If you have a quantum computer, you have a public key, you can calculate the private key for it if it's over an elliptic curve. What we use is, trying to think of the best way to simplify this. We use, the academic term for it would be perfectly hiding commitments, which means that it's still an elliptic curve, but basically for a quote unquote public key, there is an infinite amount of private keys. So while a quantum computer can calculate all of the different possible private keys, because any and all private key is a valid solution, the one private key the human actually used can't be differentiated. So my number might be 5, but a quantum computer says, oh yeah, 5 is a valid number. So is 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And for each of those different possible private keys, there's a different possible output spent. So basically, we don't prevent a quantum computer from doing all of its math. We just make it so a quantum computer, if it tries to do all of its math, can prove that any output was spent in a specific input. And because a quantum computer can say any output could have been spent in this input, it can't actually prove a specific output was spent in that input.
So it's like fundamentally not knowable. It's not just that there's no algorithm, it's not knowable what private key.
Specifically, if you have a solution for the discrete log problem, which presumably would be a quantum computer, but who knows?
Right.
You would actually be able to prove any output was spent within a specific input. And because of that, yes, it's fundamentally not knowable.
Yeah, that's excellent. Excellent work. Important work. Thanks for that explanation.
Yeah, I guess simplified it appropriately.
Yeah, you did. That was a good, simple explanation, right? So that we can get our mind around it. It's just fundamentally you have like a hiding mechanism in there that makes it fundamentally not knowable, because you've got this infinite possibilities of matches, right? I think that's good. Great. I actually have a question about Serai DEX. So, which is also a wonderful addition. And by the way, one of the partners in this group in the Privacy Roundtable is basic swap DEX, which it's an atomic swap DEX. And I believe what you're doing with Serai DEX, it's not atomic swaps. You're modeling it more on like Thor, the Thor chain system, where you have an additional crypto that's used to like make it go in a smoother way. I think it was like helping user interface development, so forth. And maybe explain a little bit more about that. How that. So are you're launching a new cryptocurrency? Is that right? And what's involved with that? That seems like a big undertaking.
Yeah, sure. So first of all, I actually, just to get this out up front, I actually really like what Basic Swap is working on, and I fully support the development of atomic swap protocols and atomic swaps themselves. My work on Serai isn't because I don't like atomic swaps or I don't want them to exist. It's because I unfortunately believe atomic swaps have too many user experience problems to obtain widespread adoptance. And I'm not trying to call out Basic Swap, because from what I know, they're doing great work. And I actually really look forward to
an excellent DEX.
Yeah, I look forward to them continuing to do great work, and ideally even proving me wrong. I'm not trying to bully Basic Swap here, I promise.
Both. It's two different approaches. Both can coexist for different purposes. Right.
So what my concerns with atomic swaps are with regards to user experience is just how they take tens of minutes generally. If you want to do a Bitcoin Monero atomic swap, in general, you have to wait for the Bitcoin transaction to lock. Then you have to wait for the Monero transaction to lock. And if you're going for, say, 6 confirms on Bitcoin, that will be an hour. The Monero transaction will be 20 minutes. But the main issue, in my opinion, is that the user has to satisfy a liveness requirement. The most naive way to say this is that the user has to remain online during the entire swap. And that's not necessarily true. They can, go out, grab lunch, and then turn their phone on after they grab lunch and kind of connect later.
Right.
But
if
they
all
do have
goes
to.
Well, but if the other guy tries to cheat you, you need to be online. Otherwise, it'll time out, right? atomic swap algorithms. That's
Right.
isn't that the main catch? If you need
So,
to ensure the atomic nature, you need to monitor it.
Yes. So if you are offline, the swap ideally just times out and you get your money back. You have to pay some transaction fees, and it's largely just a waste of everyone's time, but it's not necessarily that you lose all of your money. But in order for the swap to continue, in order to handle, actually, I do believe a liveness requirement is necessary to not lose your coins in most modern atomic swap protocols.
In some cases, right?
Yeah, I'm perfectly fine saying in some cases. For me personally, I look at it on the protocol level. That's my personal domain. I think if we're discussing, swaps on basic swap, you would have to say someone who modified the basic swap client. Anyways, the point I want to get to is that you do at least have to come online occasionally. And it's perfectly fine to say users have to check in on their swap throughout the day. But then the issue is that the swap isn't allowed to time out for the day. Because if a user is only required to check in during the day, then the swap, can't time out after 3 hours. Because now the user can't check in during the day. The swap times out after just a few hours. So in order to give the user more grace with being online or being offline, you have to increase the time that the swap is allowed to occur during. But this also increases kind of the denial of service risks, because now if you enter into a swap, in the worst case that the swap fails, you're not going to have access to your coins for, say, 24 hours, and you're not going to be able to try again with a different swap for that amount of time. So personally,
The risk.
As much as I love atomic swaps for the trustless technology they are, the fact that you kind of have to keep checking in on it, and there's a bit of slowness to it in the worst case, though of course you can argue that proper user experiences kind of abstract over this and can successfully hide it away. It makes me not confident atomic swaps are going to be the primary method of decentralized exchange between different cryptocurrency networks. So what my work on Serai does is we introduce a economically secured threshold multisig. We have our own network. It has its own validators. Our own validators put up stake. That stake is used for economic security, and then they get to create a threshold multisig to receive Bitcoin, to receive Ether, DAI, Monero. So when a user wants to do a swap, all they have to do is make a single Bitcoin transaction or a single Ethereum transaction or a single Monero transaction. They just send their coins to this multisig, they specify what should be done with it, and they get to walk away. And either the swap fails and the coins are automatically returned, or the swap succeeds and they get their coins on the other side. But there's no liveness requirement, there's no interactivity requirement, and we don't have any, timeout after however many hours on our end. It's the Serai network's management of coins is much more comparable to how a centralized exchange would manage coins. So with that, we get to apply a lot more optimizations to our transaction flow and really create a system that can have very high throughput. So
if you use liquidity pools to manage the prices, how do you?
Right. So the swaps themselves, they go through liquidity pools on the Serai network, which means that with every swap, the price adjusts according to supply and demand of the coins within the pool, and it's not an order book experience.
Right. That's awesome. So there's going to be a new coin. Are you calling it Serai? And how do you like? I mean, how are you launching that? Isn't that like something really that needs to be managed and navigated carefully?
Yeah. So as I said, validators have to put up stake to secure the multi-sigs.
How do they get their original stake? I mean, are they staking the new coin, the Serai coin?
Right.
How do they get it?
The reason we have that, this is what I'm trying to get to.
Okay,
the reason
yes,
we
please.
have the Serai coin is because validators have to put up stake, and they can't put up stake in, say, Bitcoin, because if validators are staking Bitcoin in order to create a threshold multisig to hold Bitcoin, they're going to end up having their own staked Bitcoin within their own threshold multisig. So if they do decide to be malicious and transfer out from this threshold multisig, they will also transfer out their own stake, and we will not actually be able to slash their stake, which is a requirement for economic security. So for whatever theoretical coin we use for stake, we do need to be able to program it and slash it, which is why there's the Serai coin. The Serai coin is meant to be staked by validators, and if these validators misbehave, because the Serai coin is on our own network, we can fully program it and slash it, so on and so on. So when the network launches, there won't be any of the Serai coin. It's distributed. There's no distribution to any team. There's no distribution to a DAO. I'm not fundamentally against DAOs. It just didn't work out for this exact project. There's no distribution to investors. There are no investors in Serai, et cetera, et cetera. It's completely fair launched. The initial distribution of Serai is to those who provide liquidity at the start of the network, and then when swaps go live and the network is actively facilitating swaps with whatever liquidity it attracted at Genesis, users will have the option to swap from Bitcoin, Ether, DAI, Monero to staked Serai. So if a user wants to become a validator, they will be able to immediately swap from Bitcoin into Serai, which will be staked to the validator they're creating. And that's how we kind of have this, that's how the validators actually switch to having stake and having these economically secure model. When the network launches, the expectation is users will do that. Else, the standard emissions process is programmed to create an economically secure environment within roughly 1 year.
Sounds like a good plan. It's really interesting. It sounds like there's a big incentive for the initial stakers to get in on that the release. That's and so it's staked. When you say you can swap for staked Serai, will that be staked? Will that be like locked for that first year? Is that you mentioned? Is that the idea?
Yeah,
How long will it be? Will it need to remain staked?
Validators are allowed to unstake, but only into the capacity of the economic security. So if you have validators who have staked in order to secure, say, $10 million, and then they actually are securing $10 million, you can't just have all of them unstake and walk away, because then you would be left with zero stake securing that same $10 million, because validators unstaking doesn't mean that the coins that they're securing magically leave the network. If it's provided as liquidity, it's still going to be there as liquidity. And obviously users can remove liquidity, but we can't assume users will go and remove liquidity just because validators unstake. And even if we assume that, when users notice, sometime over the next week, they'll get to removing their liquidity, that doesn't change that there's a time delay to that. So validators are allowed to unstake, but only into the available economic security of the network, in order to ensure that the network always has economic security, or at least do our best to ensure that. So users who swap to stake Serai, they're able to unstake, but only into the available economic security. And when the network launches, it won't have yet developed its economic security. So it's not explicitly, locked for 1 year or 6 months or any period of time. It's just locked until the network is economic secure.
I see.
But
interesting.
After 1 year, no matter what, the network is the emissions curve for the first year ensures economic security after 1 year. So that's kind of the longest possible time it will take.
Got it. Yeah, that's very interesting. So, Reuben, Dr. Cap, what questions do you have for Luke?
Reuben, do you have anything?
No, I'm quite familiar
Reuben?
with Serai. Hello. Yeah, I'm quite familiar with Serai. I just heard the baby crying and it sounded like he wanted to ask a question to Luke.
He's got right. He's got questions.
Firstly, questions. No, Luke, first and thank you so much for being here. Yeah, I'm Dr. Cat. I advise Swap, which is the Banner Particle project. It's not really a question I have. I sort of say with regards to Swap at Swap DEX, you are very much currently
your connection's a bit weird. It's like
it's coming in and out a little.
Yeah.
Yep. Let me just. Can you hear me a bit better?
Maybe a bit. Yes.
Oh. Just want to say, Luke, thanks for coming on. You really appreciate it. An honor to have you as a guest here. I just want to say I'm an advisor to Basic Swap DEX, which is a project that it's an application that falls under the banner and domain of the Particl project. Just want to sort of say, yeah, you're completely right. The current issue with atomic swap DEX is there are heavy requirements with regards to syncing, and maintaining activity. The current implementation of basic swap DEX, you are having to dash chains, sync to the network, maintain persistent online state in order to ensure that you're synced up to the to make sure you are to the order book. And the other thing is, and actually, that's quite a heavy storage requirement, and that the persistent online requirement. So from an end user perspective, current version of that a lot of the significant sort of user friendliness limitation adoption. What I will say is that actually we kind of cycle of these come up with we've essentially come up with a solution for a mobile compatible client or a mobile version of basic swap. It doesn't actually have a requirement download and chains, and actually utilizes block explorer and essentially our own sort of to kind of make sure all the steps of the atomic swap process go across. It can be done so in a way where installation and
so Dr. Cap, it's coming in and out a little bit. Let me see if I can summarize a little bit. So like you pointed out that there's like memory requirements. Hello, there's memory requirements for Luke's technique that uses an additional currency, and that you're working on addressing the user interface issues with basic swap, which were brought up. There's timing issues and so forth. So it's fading in and out. Maybe if you type, I can get that across. If you type your question maybe into
super clear,
Discord. Very clear question, because it's fading in and out.
Just as one clarification,
really?
I believe that the discussed memory requirements were actually the storage requirements for running various nodes or various blockchains with basic swap.
Yes, absolutely. Right. Storage requirements. Yes.
So what I'm going to say is I think we have kind of worked out ways to solve issues relating to the persistent online status requirements for running a an atomic swap DEX, in terms of the messaging aspects of it, and we've kind of solved the storage aspects of it as well. A lot of that essentially relates kind of rather to reconfiguring our DEX to point to block explorers rather than necessarily having to download and sync chains. I do think there is there's a bit of testing that needs to be done, but conceptually we kind of worked out some fairly significant solutions. I'm going to be upfront. I wish CryptoGuard or Felix were on this call, because I know CryptoGuard certainly has a much better, a more comprehensive understanding of this.
He is, I think.
Is he?
Yeah.
CG?
I'm not
I invite him to sort of add anything to what I'm saying if he is, but I just can't see him on the group today.
Well,
but
he's talking on the Discord, so I'm not exactly sure which
Maybe
account he is.
But in any case, what I'm going to say is I think some of those problems are, definitely solvable. And we're making pretty good progress with our sort of mobile-friendly, compatible version of basic swap DEX. I will say, I'm really happy to see, AMM type solutions. I'm happy to see solutions that incorporate Monero and that are embracing of privacy coins. So I'm always happy to embrace other projects, other technologies, and other approaches. And I do think, the way you guys have gone about it, from what I can sort of understand listening to this, I think my question is actually, so I think for me, the main thing that I can sort of, gather is the initial launch for this, is going to require a certain amount of social proofing. So in terms of all the potential sort of providers of stake, the liquidity providers, how have you guys been getting on as a community in terms of building awareness, in terms of communicating the sort of launch, the launch schedules, and in terms of sort of the testing up? I think I read an incidentally, I read a tweet. I know you'd encountered some issues with the peer-to-peer networks you guys have been using for messaging. I just want to find out if that's all been resolved, and if not, what sort of issues we're encountering, and is there anything we could potentially do to help? So that's me. Hope I got everything across.
Thanks, Dr. Cap. That was clear.
Yeah. First of all, I completely hear you regarding Basic Swap having a better UX, especially with this mobile client. I look forward to that personally. I still have my reservations, but I think even with my concerns about atomic swaps, they absolutely have a place in the ecosystem for several different use cases and specific needs. I completely agree that we should both exist with our alternate methods, and I really do wish Basic Swap success in that regard. With regards to our Genesis, Serai is a proof of stake blockchain, not as in the various proof of stake systems developed on top of Bitcoin code bases over the past decade, yet in the more modern Byzantine fault tolerant discussion. Not to say that some of those Bitcoin code bases haven't also evolved to include Byzantine fault tolerance, just to say it's not about using the value within outputs to determine the next block producer, yet a round-based process to form consensus on blocks. So with that, we do need an explicit set of validators in order to do validator set rotations with and so on. And at Genesis, yes, it is a fresh system. There is no Serai coin yet because it is the start of the network, and there's no way to get the Serai coin because it is the start of the network. So at the very Genesis, there will be a fixed list of Genesis validators, and that fixed list will not be satisfying the economic security requirements. So there is definitely a social component to it there. With regards to awareness and how the community has been organized thus far, the main form of awareness on my end has been the various presentations I've been giving, largely within the Monero project in the Monero community. So I personally would hope that large portions of the Monero community are aware of this, and when the time finally comes, they will not miss their opportunity if they want to participate. With regards to how development has gone thus far, just to be clear, our community is organized on Discord and Matrix. We have done a few attempts at testnets before. There has been issues within the pipeline, and we've resolved some of those during the testnets, and some of the testnets we retired and solved them after because it wasn't feasible to continue trying the testnet and simultaneously be working on the pipeline issues encountered. One of the main things for that, yes, has been our peer-to-peer network. We didn't write our own peer-to-peer network. We used libp2p because it was an off-the-shelf solution, and obviously it's used across the industry. And the goal of Serai wasn't to write a highly performant peer-to-peer network. It was to be a cross-chain decentralized exchange. And for part of that, we needed a peer-to-peer network that met whatever requirements we set. So personally, my experience is not with working with libp2p. I have successfully worked with it now to some degree of success. And I'm unsure the current status of its efficiency and performance. But that was what my tweet, I think a couple of weeks ago, were about. I've done my best to create a reasonable configuration for it, which should be sufficient to meet the needs that we will place on it during, testnet and mainnet. Yet, because that's not my foremost field of expertise, it's something I'm concerned about, and it's definitely something that we're going to have to do more testnets with and really ensure the safety of.
No, thanks for sort of elaborating on that. I really appreciate that. I'm going to sort of offer my hand on behalf of our project. Certainly if you guys want any sort of assistance in terms of the peer-to-peer networking side of stuff, we have our own sort of fairly special. Well, we have our own peer-to-peer networking solution which underpins basic swap DEX, which is the SMSG network, which is essentially completely decentralized, open source, open peer-to-peer network that's kind of it's an evolution of the bit messaging protocol. It's quite it's fairly, I'd say it's pretty well optimized for sort of messaging, particularly with regards to sort of cryptocurrency transactions and contract execution. So if you guys if you guys feel that you're not getting optimal results, we're more than happy to sort of offer what we have, as it were, and collaboration and partnership from that point of view. So
thank you. I do really appreciate it. With regards to SMSG specifically, the Serai network doesn't just have to send coordination messages between its validators, but it actually needs to come to consensus on every message that they're coordinating over. So for the discussed peer-to-peer network, there's a lot of different parts to the Serai stack, and we technically have two different peer-to-peer networks, but one isn't my problem, and the one being discussed is my problem, and the one that I'm working with here. For this specific peer-to-peer network, we actually use a ephemeral Tendermint blockchain in order to post our messages, and then we use Tendermint to come to consensus on it. And our peer-to-peer network isn't delivering messages; they're delivering the Tendermint blocks, consensus messages, and the transactions on the Tendermint blockchain. So my concern there with regards to something like SMSG is we do need not 100 millisecond latency in every environment. No, but we do need latency of just a couple of seconds, and we're sending probably hundreds of messages every few seconds. So that was kind of why we went with a libp2p solution, just because off the shelf should be easy enough to handle a few hundred messages every few seconds with low latency.
Is that code from the Cosmos project? Is that the Tendermint?
So the Serai blockchain itself isn't using Cosmos, it's using Substrate, which is a blockchain development framework comparable to Cosmos. Then for this section of the code base, which we've been discussing, we use ephemeral blockchains. We'll spawn it up, we run it for a week, and then we throw it away.
Wow.
And yes, it's just used for validators to come to consensus with each other and communicate. It's not actually relevant to the operations on the Serai blockchain, and it's not actually, impacting the Bitcoin transactions we send.
Got it.
So that uses Tendermint as its consensus algorithm. Tendermint itself is just a consensus protocol, and there is an implementation of Tendermint, which is also called Tendermint. So you have a protocol and an implementation, and then you have the Cosmos SDK, which was built around the Tendermint implementation. Now it's built around a fork known as Comet BFT. They finally made it so the implementation was not named after the protocol. Serai doesn't use the Tendermint implementation, nor does it use Comet BFT. Serai uses its own implementation of the consensus protocol, because we didn't choose Tendermint because we wanted to use the Cosmos SDK for this section of the code base. We chose Tendermint, the consensus protocol, because it's a very simple consensus protocol. That isn't to diminish the work on it. That's to say that the authors of it did a very good job at creating a very simple, efficient, yet also secure consensus protocol. So Serai has its own implementation just because it was the easiest consensus protocol for us to implement and move forward with.
Right. Makes sense.
How many validators does Tendermint kind of support? Like in the hundreds, right? Or has it been able to scale into the thousands? I mean, not that you probably need thousands for Serai DEX, but just want to know like the limitations of Tendermint.
Right. How many do you need too?
Requirements, right?
So Tendermint, the most projects I think in the Cosmos SDK systems target going up to about 100 validators. They might, go up to 150. I don't know their exact numbers. It's configurable, so I don't want to speak for, every single project that's ever existed in the Cosmos ecosystem. But generally, roughly 100 is a good rule of thumb. And then some networks in the Cosmos ecosystem are actually decreasing it to a much smaller set of validators, because that still offers, even just 30 validators can offer the supermajority of economic security and the supermajority of decentralization. Just because instead of having some validators run multiple nodes or some affiliated organizations run multiple nodes, they kind of consolidate into just one node, but they still maintain the same distribution of who manages them and security. So some networks have actually been shrinking their set because they still get most of the benefits, yet with greatly increased performance, because now they have to do a third of the work. So for Serai specifically, we're targeting up to 150 validators within our Tendermint configurations. The Serai blockchain itself, it uses the Substrate blockchain framework, and we don't actually use Tendermint with that. We use their preferred consensus protocol, known as Grandpa, which has a few differences. But even with Grandpa, we're only targeting 150 validators. The main thing for Serai, though, is we don't have 150 validators across the entire network of networks. We have 150 validators per network. So for our Bitcoin integration, that has 150 validators. Our Ethereum integration will have 150, or of course, up to 150 validators. The Monero integration up to 150, and then for Serai itself up to 150. So at launch, we'll be able to support up to 600 validators because of the horizontal approach to it.
What would be like the minimum threshold? Because obviously you kind of need the onboard validators, right? So I mean, like onboarding like 100 off the bat for like Bitcoin or so. I mean, is that a bit hopeful, or do you already have like, oh yeah, we already know roughly who this 100 people should be? I guess what the minimum threshold for security is there.
Yeah. Personally, I would like to launch the network with 11 validators. and that will be the same 11 across all of the 4 different networks in this case. The 4 different quote-unquote networks being the Bitcoin integration, Ethereum integration, Monero integration, and the Serai network proper. The challenge there is, of course, finding 11 quality people who the community will trust at large, or at least trust 2/3 of. When it comes to becoming economically secure and users signing up to become validators, I think initially we would be hoping for somewhere in the range of 20 to 30 validators stepping up, staking, and contributing to the economic security side of things, and enabling the Genesis validators who are there based on social proof to retire and be flushed out. So the fact that we can support up to 150 is a technical detail and not actually the environment we're looking for at the very start. As time goes on, yes, it would be great to go from that 30, those 30 validators we're kind of hoping for 1 year in to kind of get to that 50 to 100 range. I would love to see it, but that's not the immediate plan nor goal.
That makes sense. Cool. Really excited. I mean, you said that it's like you're going through audits now, right? So it's pretty close to being ready, I suppose.
Yeah, we're working on cleaning up the code base, making sure what's tested is tested, and doing audits. Currently, it's very segmented, so I want to be clear, we're not currently auditing the entire Serai code base. Right now, we're soliciting some quotes regarding our cryptography. We're soliciting an audit for our Monero library. And then we're also, I'm personally trying to get someone I know to do a paid review of some of our integration logic.
And so, yeah, I guess like one of the big questions that I guess because Pivax here, Firo is here, Particl is here. Obviously, if we would like to get on Serai DEX, what would be required? Given there's no kind of governance mechanism, is it just like a matter of people willing to provide the stake to set up that validator network, or what is exactly required, right? And are there kind of any sort of limits to, because you're using more like a horizontal approach, so I'm not sure whether that affects oh yeah, I want to support 2,000 assets, right, or 2,000 blockchains, versus Tor chain, which can I think only support I don't know, a couple of hundred or something like that. So it would be interesting to kind of know that. Yeah.
So that was actually one of the main goals of doing this horizontal approach, was to be able to reduce friction for onboarding new networks and to better enable onboarding new networks. Because if we have everyone run every node and participate in every integration, if Pivx or Firo wants to get, or Particl wants to get integrated, they don't just have to do it's not just do the integration and find 5 to 10 people who are willing to run the integration. It's convince every single existing validator to now also run and maintain daemon for their network and the associated infrastructure. So that's one of the main reasons for the horizontal approach, is that you don't have to convince everyone to run your node integration. You only have to convince a few people who are willing to stake and do it. With regards to the actual integration process, obviously there needs to be the development work on that. I'd like to be explicitly clear, I'm not requesting any volunteered development work before we have, at least a release candidate for our 1.0, because I would hate to hear that any project stepped up to do an integration and then I rewrote a chunk of the code and now they also have to rewrite the corresponding part of their integration. That's absolutely not something I want to have anyone incur. But someone would have to do an integration. After launch, I plan on doing some integrations myself. If anyone wants to volunteer an integration, that could be done, although they should probably temperature check it first with the community, because when the time comes to deploy the integration, that will still be a vote by the validators in practice. So even if It's not you can write an integration, find validators, and just move forward with it. In practice, you still have to go through a vote by the existing validators on the network.
So you do have to get buy-in from the existing validators to add a new coin.
You have to convince them that the integration is secure and that the network should be integrated. You don't have to convince them to run a node or put any money into it.
Makes sense. Got it.
So that's interesting, right? Because obviously, I mean, like, Monero's a great community, but it's also known to be, it has its maxi components, right? Like, so I guess it really depends who that initial group of 11 people,
who the validators
are. Yeah.
Right. but it's not strictly a Monero thing, right? Serai DEX, I mean, it's a big deal that you're including Monero, but it's distinct from the Monero community. Would that be a fair statement, Luke?
Yeah, and I've done my best to be clear that Serai is not a Monero project. It's a project integrating Monero, but it has its own path. And when the time comes, Serai should choose what's best for Serai, not what's best for Monero. And while that should be the same thing most of the time, with regards to the decisions Serai makes that have relevance to Monero, it also means that several months ago, it might even be a year ago now, someone tried to get ordinals on the Monero blockchain going. Specifically, they were called Mordinals, which was its own whole mess. But it's kind of my perfect example of this. If Serai was a Monero DEX, oh yeah, we would have integrated Mordinals. Oh, it would be such a great thing for a Monero decentralized exchange to support Monero NFTs. But it doesn't make sense. Like, first of all, Mordinals didn't make sense, but it didn't make sense for Serai to integrate NFTs. So what's best for Serai is not to integrate NFTs. But what's best for a Monero decentralized exchange would be to integrate the Monero NFTs. And it's kind of like my perfect example of why and when Serai would do what's best for Serai and not what's best for Monero. The other thing here would, of course, be if someone was a maximalist, they could argue, oh, well, it's best not to integrate PivX and Firo and Particl and Zcash because those threaten the Monero monopoly. But no, what's best for Serai is to encourage open access across ecosystems and to integrate, all of these projects so long as we believe that they're maintained, stable, and going to contribute value to the ecosystem. What I really don't want to see is someone, makes a new coin, it's live 30 days, and there's already a pull request to Serai to add it, because I really don't want to have to go through the quote-unquote delisting process. I really want, an integration on Serai to be a commitment to maintain it for several years and a long-standing show of support. So it's best not to list things that we don't know if we'll survive the next 3 months even.
Right. That makes sense. That's wonderful. It's wonderful what you're doing. One thing I have to mention, we're coming up on the hour. We might check and see if there's questions from our listeners for you, Luke. Let's see. Take this opportunity. If anybody has questions, raise your hand.
There's one replying on Twitter, if I should read that out.
Yes, please.
How can the system be considered trustless if trusting validators are involved? I don't personally advertise Serai as a trustless decentralized exchange. If you want a trustless decentralized exchange, you should go use Basic Swap because they use atomic swaps, which are trustless. Serai has this economically secure system, but there's still a trust assumption that the validators are rational in the economic game and that the economic security doesn't fail. For example, if overnight Bitcoin goes up in price 1 million times over, presumably we did not have 1 million times capacity for whatever Bitcoin was being secured by the Serai network. So there are edge cases in which the economic security can fall through, at least for temporary bits of time. And that is an assumption users have to make, that either the economic security won't fail and all actors are rational in the economic game, or even if the economic security does fail, validators won't take advantage of it for whatever reason. It only fails for a second, and during that split second, validators aren't ready to capitalize on it, or etc. But I just want to be clear, I'm not here to advertise Serai as a trustless system.
Okay, good point. Any other questions? Let's see. I see any. Well, in the final minutes that we have here, I have a quick question. So, related to the work on Monero. So, you're working on there's multiple advancements going on. There's also like Seraphis, I think. How do those compare with no more? Well, how do the proposed advancements for Monero compare, Reuben, with and Luke, with what's been done for Firo recently? With the upgrades with the Levanta Spark.
Reuben, do you mind if I start with kind of the Monero side of things?
Yeah, of course. Go ahead.
Thank you. So my work on Monero started out on full chain membership proofs, and that was meant to be done for Seraphis. Seraphis itself is a composition. So there is this piece of it called a membership proof, and you can specify anything you want for that membership proof as long as it meets the concept of a membership proof. So you could even specify, like Bitcoin transactions, just immediately specify what output they're using as an input. Technically, that meets the definition of a membership proof. And if you theoretically wanted to, it wouldn't be private, but you could use such a quote unquote membership proof, just directly specifying the output you want to spend as an input with Seraphis. And Seraphis was proposed with a one out of many proof, which is kind of an improvement on ring signatures, and would have increased the size of the ring, the size of the amount of outputs that were potentially spent in this input, all the way to 128. So Seraphis was
from 16.
Yes, Seraphis was this better protocol composition, and Seraphis was initially proposed with still rings, just a larger ring and a more efficient proof for it. So my work on full chain membership proofs was for Seraphis. It was enabling Seraphis not to be 1 out of 128, but 1 out of hundreds of millions. Right. Yes. So what full chain membership proofs plus is we couldn't deploy full chain membership proofs directly with the existing ring-CT protocol present on Monero. So what full chain membership proofs plus does is it adds in the missing pieces. It does all of the necessary.
Just for clarity, that's what hides the amount, right? That's the algorithm that hides the amount.
Ring-CT is the current privacy protocol, which is ring signatures. That's the ring part of ring-CT, plus hidden amounts or confidential transactions. That's the CT part of ring-CT.
Got it.
So my work on full chain membership proofs plus is it adds all of the functionality necessary to ring-CT in order to support full chain membership proofs without relying on the Seraphis upgrade. So full chain membership proofs plus has superseded Seraphis on the protocol level. We are still looking at deploying the Seraphis code base because a lot of this code was very nicely written and well tested and documented for all of this new privacy and wallet functionality. And full chain membership proofs, while it is a distinct protocol, it aims to offer a lot of the same privacy and wallet functionality features. So the Seraphis codebase is still being discussed for deployment, but the Seraphis protocol, the exact cryptography and math used for it, that's been effectively replaced by my work on full chain membership proofs plus, which offered a bit of a tighter timeline. And also, it doesn't require a hard migration. That was one of the concerns about Seraphis, but it was deemed sufficiently worthwhile.
Where
all
hard
existing.
migration is where the address is changed type?
Yes, it was still going to be the same blockchain and the same network, but if you wanted to receive a Seraphis output, you had to get a new Seraphis address, and we would have retired all existing addresses. Even if someone, set it in stone and put that stone in the town square, that Monero address would stop working. So one of the great things about the full chain membership proofs + scheme is all existing addresses will continue to work for the foreseeable future.
That's a big improvement. That's
Yeah.
excellent.
And of course, Reuben, if you want to now talk about how that compares and relates to Fira.
Well, I mean, because obviously Spark is, it's very similar to Seraphis. One might say that Seraphis was heavily inspired by our work in Spark, and because we already adopted Spark, and I guess both Seraphis and Spark have this modular kind of structure where as Luke said, you just need a membership proof, right? And right now, yes, we are using the choice of one of many proofs was kind of predates our work back to when we were using something called Sigma, and then Lelantus, and then Lelantus Spark. We've been using one of many proofs, mainly because it's trustless, it's pretty efficient, but more importantly, it was very simple. But obviously, it does have its limitations in that it doesn't have the ability to scale into the hundreds of thousands or millions for that matter, right? And which is why, we've actually looked into full chain membership proofs, so we call it the curve tree method, right? Which is, I think probably full chain membership proofs is a better name for it. I think curve tree is more of the paper that this technique comes from, and it's a technique in itself. So we actually, have been discussing with Luke as well to implement full chain membership proofs within Spark, which I guess would be similar. So that would also give us the global anonymity sets. There are some differences between, I think what Luke has been doing for FCMP++, I don't know what the exact name is pretty suited for Monero because you don't have to change the address system and whatnot. But as I understand it, Luke can correct me if I'm wrong, is that it is very I think it is estimated to be slightly less efficient than if you use something like Seraphis or Spark due to the structure. But it is not a big enough difference that you would say let's totally change the address structure, right? I mean, maybe that may be still in play, but it seems that FCMP++ achieves a lot of feature parity and comparable efficiency to, let's say, Seraphis or Spark. But obviously, I mean, Seraphis and Spark do have some efficiency benefits over there, but almost comparable feature sets. So yeah, I don't know. Luke can correct me if I'm wrong.
Full chain membership proofs was originally going to be for Seraphis, as I said. Sorry for switching my mic. I apologize if this was a bit worse. I was prior using a Bluetooth one, which
all good.
Finally had a bug and disconnected. So for Seraphis, the proposal was to use full chain membership proofs, and those membership proofs was going to meet kind of the expectations made by the Seraphis protocol. And now the work is on full chain membership proofs ++, where the ++ is the pieces of Seraphis that was needed for full chain membership proofs to occur, but now kind of the ring CT side of things. And to be clear, full chain membership proofs ++ is not actually a subset or taken from the Seraphis protocol, at least not directly. Indirectly, you can do a lot of design comparisons. I'm just trying to clarify, the Seraphis protocol extended how we saw the Monero protocol today, and full chain membership proofs was just a piece of that. And now what full chain membership proofs ++ does is it adds the necessary pieces of infrastructure to enable full chain membership proofs on Monero today. But because it's kind of this different infrastructure, it used to be the Seraphis infrastructure, now it's the FCMP++ infrastructure. With that change in infrastructure, we get a slightly different full chain membership proof. It's the same techniques, it's the same premise, but we prior passed in two different numbers and got one number out. Now we pass in 2 different numbers and we get 3 numbers out. So it's slightly different in that regard. For Firo, they have Lulantis Spark, which is their own privacy composition, and it was quite well done. I really respect a lot of the work on it. And it's kind of the same premise there. It has a modular membership proof, which the full chain membership proof can satisfy. The full chain membership proof originally did 2 numbers in, 1 number out for, full chain membership proofs plus, it will do 2 numbers in, 3 numbers out. And with some slight modifications, it can also be applied to Spark, and it will do 2 numbers in, 2 numbers out for them. So all slightly different, but all the same techniques, premise, and steps forward.
Well, thank you for that explanation, and it was good to go through that. We are over our hour. So is there anything else we need to cover in this session? Gosh, it's been a great discussion, Luke and Reuben, Dr. Cap, everyone. Fantastic discussion. And Luke, we really appreciate you coming on, hearing what you have to say, and your wonderful work related to privacy and making the new tools that everyone will benefit from. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, I truly appreciate the invite and being here. So thank you.
Okay, with that, we'll close it. Thanks a lot. Thank you to everyone for joining, to our listeners. Bye.